Galactic High School was an institution of prestige, an advanced academy where species from across the galaxy came to study together, bringing with them diverse cultures, languages, and extraordinary abilities. Built on a massive space station orbiting a quiet planet, it was both a symbol of unity and a hub of competition. Every student had worked hard to be here, and most belonged to races that were already highly respected in the galactic community. Here, their talents were honed, their minds sharpened, and their endurance tested. But for Alex, being the only human, the experience was more daunting than anything else. From the first day he had arrived, Alex felt out of place. Humans were known in the galaxy, but only recently had they been considered worthy enough to attend institutions like Galactic High School. His admission was a significant event for the school, marking the first time a human had crossed the threshold into what was considered one of the most advanced educational institutions in existence. Unfortunately, the other students didn't share the same enthusiasm. To many, Alex was a curiosity, a creature with limited abilities and a soft exterior, lacking the tough exoskeletons, sharp claws, or psychic abilities that many other students possessed. Alex's first class was a painful initiation. As he entered the bioengineering lab, all eyes turned to him, and he could feel the intensity of their gaze. He was painfully aware of his relatively frail, small frame in a room full of towering, alien figures. Some students had green-tinted scales that shimmered under the bright lab lights, while others had complex, multifaceted eyes that seemed to reflect his image back at him, making him feel like a tiny insect under a magnifying glass. One student even had 4 arms, each holding a different textbook, and Alex marveled at how casually they flipped through pages with multiple appendages. The initial stares turned into whispers. A group of aliens with long, slender bodies covered in silvery fur exchanged amused glances, their voices low but sharp enough for Alex to catch fragments. Primitive ... How could they allow a human here? One whispered, its lips curling back to reveal sharp, needle-like teeth. Alex took a deep breath, adjusting his backpack and attempting to ignore the whispers, even as his cheeks burned. He'd expected some resistance. Humans weren't exactly known for their strength or resilience, and he knew that some races looked down on Earth's inhabitants. But he wasn't prepared for the intensity of it, nor the feeling of isolation that seemed to close in on him from all sides. Despite his nerves, Alex tried to focus on his work, determined to prove himself. Yet, it wasn't long before some of his classmates took their disdain a step further. During the second week, while setting up a biology experiment, Alex felt a sudden, sharp jolt in his hand as he touched his workstation. Pulling back with a yelp, he looked around, noticing a few aliens chuckling. One of them, a tall, red-skinned creature with thin tentacles protruding from its head, gave him a smug look. "Human reflexes are so slow," it sneered, crossing its arms. "You'd think someone as delicate as you would be more careful." Ignoring the remark, Alex tried to continue his work, but his hands were trembling. He knew the alien had done something to his station, probably with an electrostatic charge, something that wouldn't affect them but would give him a painful shock. He could feel the humiliation rising in his chest, but he clenched his jaw, forcing himself to keep his composure. He couldn't let them see how much it affected him. Each day, the bullying grew worse. In one class, a telekinetic alien used its powers to pull his chair out from under him as he tried to sit down, sending him sprawling on the floor. Laughter erupted around the room, and Alex felt his face turn red as he scrambled to get up. In another class, a student with iridescent blue skin sent a stream of cold mist in his direction, freezing the contents of his water bottle solid and causing the bottle to shatter. Bits of ice sprayed across the table, and Alex couldn't miss the way the aliens around him snickered at his reaction. He did his best to ignore the taunts and tricks, focusing instead on his studies. But it was difficult. The alien curriculum was already challenging, filled with advanced concepts in physics, engineering, and genetics that pushed him to his limits. His classmates' open hostility made it harder for him to focus, and he felt the weight of their judgment constantly. There were days when he wondered if it was worth it, if he should just give up and leave. But every time he felt close to quitting, he reminded himself of why he was here. His family had been proud when he'd been accepted. They'd watched the announcement together, cheering when his name was listed as the first human in Galactic High's history. He couldn't let them down. And beyond that, Alex knew that his presence here represented more than just his own success. It was an opportunity to show the galaxy that humans had potential, that they weren't as primitive as these aliens believed. One day, after another humiliating experience in the dining hall, where his lunch was accidentally knocked off his table by a particularly rough student with large claws, Alex found himself sitting alone, staring down at his empty tray. He had lost his appetite. Around him, the other students chatted and laughed, their voices a dull roar in his ears. He wondered if anyone would ever see him for who he was, beyond the limitations of his species. Suddenly, a tall alien with a deep purple shell approached his table. It was one of the few species he hadn't encountered closely yet, and its presence was almost intimidating. Its many eyes looked down at him, studying him for a long moment. "You must be Alex, the human," it said in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. "I am Professor Rashal. I've heard a lot about you." Alex looked up, surprised that a teacher would approach him so directly. Most instructors remained impartial, rarely interacting with students outside of lessons. "Yes, that's me," he replied, trying to sound confident. Rashal gave a slow nod. "I've seen how others treat you," it said quietly, its voice carrying a weight of empathy. Unfortunate. You may be the only human here, but that does not make you inferior. In fact, I have watched you closely, and I believe you have a great deal to offer." Alex blinked, not sure how to respond. He had expected Rashal to deliver a lecture about not causing trouble or disrupting class, like some of his other teachers had done. But this was unexpected. "I want you to remember something," Rashal continued, its many eyes softening as they looked at him. "Many of the greatest leaders in our galaxy came from backgrounds where they were not understood or were underestimated. Sometimes that adversity is what shapes us into our best selves. Do not let their small-mindedness define your worth." Alex felt a surge of emotion, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. For the first time since he'd arrived, he felt seen not as an alien curiosity, but as a person. "Thank you," he said quietly, managing a small smile. Rashal nodded once more before turning and gliding away, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. The professor's words stayed with him, echoing in his mind as he returned to his dorm that night. Over the following weeks, Alex began to change his approach. He could not match the aliens in strength or natural abilities, but he found other ways to stand his ground. He trained himself to respond calmly to the pranks, refusing to react in ways that would give his bullies satisfaction. He focused on his studies with renewed determination, pushing himself harder than he ever had before. When they taunted him, he channeled his frustration into motivation, using it to fuel his desire to succeed. Little did his bullies know, they were stoking a fire within him that would eventually show them just how strong humans could be. The simulation chamber at Galactic High School was the crown jewel of the Academy's training facilities. In this chamber, scenarios were designed to test the survival skills of students from diverse worlds, adapting to each species' unique strengths and weaknesses. Each training session simulated environments that could range from icy wastelands to hostile jungle planets. But today's exercise was meant to be relatively simple, a basic survival scenario intended to build teamwork among students who often competed. Alex entered the simulation chamber with his usual quiet resolve. He knew he was an outsider here, and it was hard to shake the feeling of always being one step behind. But he'd developed a habit of observing his surroundings carefully, a skill he'd honed since his arrival at Galactic High. He noticed things others missed, the smallest details in alien expressions, the tiniest cues in their body language. This habit had helped him avoid trouble when possible, but today he was grateful for the chance to prove himself. The chamber door sealed with a heavy clang, and a shimmering field passed over Alex and his classmates, initiating the simulation. The lights dimmed, replaced by the soft glow of simulated stars in an artificial night sky. Thick foliage appeared around them, along with the sounds of alien creatures in the distance. The holograms were highly detailed, creating an environment that felt almost real. Alex took a deep breath, his senses adjusting to the scene. He noticed the slight chill in the air, the rustling of leaves, and the faint, earthy scent of alien soil. Nearby, his classmates huddled in small groups, chatting and laughing as they examined the environment. To them, this was just another exercise, a chance to show off their unique abilities and skills. Alex kept to himself, watching from a distance, aware that any attempt to join them would likely be met with dismissive looks or sarcastic comments. A voice crackled over the chamber's speakers, the voice of their instructor, Professor Rashal. "Students, welcome to the Wilderness Survival Simulation. Your objective is to reach the extraction point on the other side of the jungle. Along the way, you may encounter obstacles and threats that require teamwork to overcome. Remember, this is not a competition. You are to work together and prioritize the safety of every member." Some of the students rolled their eyes, exchanging amused glances. For most of them, teamwork wasn't a priority, they were more interested in proving their superiority. Alex noticed Ulok, a tall alien with dark green scales and sharp, glistening claws, smirking as he adjusted his equipment. Ulok had made a habit of taunting Alex, often challenging him to physical tasks he knew Alex couldn't complete. Alex's muscles tensed as he saw Ulok's gaze shift in his direction, a familiar glint of mischief in his eyes. "Well, human," Ulok called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Think you can keep up? Or are we going to have to carry you?" Several of the other students chuckled, their laughter echoing in the simulated jungle. Alex felt a flash of anger but suppressed it, reminding himself of Professor Rashal's advice. He forced a calm expression and replied, "I'll be fine, thanks. I've managed so far." Ulok raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "We'll see about that." As the group began to move through the dense foliage, Alex kept to the back, watching his classmates as they navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Each alien had their own unique way of handling the environment. Some used their sharp senses to detect subtle changes in the atmosphere, while others relied on physical strength to push through obstacles. Alex observed their techniques, making mental notes of what might be useful for himself. After about 10 minutes of walking, the simulation took an unexpected turn. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, and the soft glow of the stars above dimmed, replaced by an ominous red light. The familiar sounds of distant creatures faded, replaced by the heavy rustling of leaves and the crackling of flames. Alex's heart raced as he realized the temperature was rising. The jungle holograms began to shimmer, replaced by a scorching desert landscape with rivers of lava cutting across their path. Warning unexpected environmental shift, came Professor Rashal's voice, sounding tense. "Please remain calm. This is a malfunction. We are attempting to reset the simulation." Panic rippled through the group as the ground shook again, more violently this time. A gust of hot wind swept over them, and the air grew thick with the stinging scent of sulfur. The temperature continued to climb, and Alex felt sweat trickling down his neck. His classmates exchanged nervous glances, their usual confidence replaced by a sense of unease. Zira, a slender alien with silver fur and a long, flexible tail, looked around frantically. "What's going on? This isn't supposed to happen." Ulok sneered, though his voice trembled. "Calm down. We're the top students at this academy. We can handle a little heat." But despite his words, Alex could see the fear in Ulok's eyes. The environment was becoming dangerously real, and without proper guidance they were all at risk. Professor Rashal's voice returned over the speakers, but this time it was distorted, fading in and out. Students ... remain attempting to regain control. The voice cut off, and a thick, acrid fog began to seep into the chamber, obscuring their vision and making it hard to breathe. Alex instinctively covered his mouth with his sleeve, his mind racing. He'd read about situations like this, survival scenarios in extreme heat, limited visibility, and dangerous terrain. His classmates were powerful in many ways, but they lacked the specific training and instincts that humans had developed through centuries of survival on Earth. "Everyone, get down low to the ground," Alex shouted, his voice cutting through the growing panic. The others looked at him in surprise, but they didn't argue. One by one, they crouched down, following his lead. The thick fog hung above them, but near the ground, the air was clearer and cooler. Alex crawled forward, guiding them through the blinding mist, his senses on high alert. As they moved, the sounds of shifting terrain grew louder. The ground cracked, revealing jagged rocks and small rivers of molten lava. Alex knew they had to keep moving, but he could feel his classmates' fear growing with each step. "This isn't what we trained for," whispered Riki, a translucent blue-skinned alien whose usual calm demeanor was shattered. Her voice shook as she looked to Alex with desperation. "What do we do?" Alex swallowed his own fear, forcing himself to think clearly. He remembered a survival technique his father had taught him back on Earth when in a crisis, stay focused on immediate goals and break the problem down step by step. He glanced around, taking stock of their surroundings. They needed to find shelter, somewhere out of reach of the toxic fog and heat. There. He pointed to a rocky outcrop in the distance, slightly elevated above the lava flows. "If we can reach that ledge, we'll have a better view and maybe find a safe path." The group hesitated, looking at each other uncertainly. Ulok scowled, clearly reluctant to take orders from Alex. But even he couldn't deny the urgency of the situation. Finally, he nodded, and the others followed suit. They moved quickly, keeping low to avoid the worst of the fumes, and Alex led them with steady, confident steps. Along the way, he noticed that several of his classmates were struggling. Some were visibly weakened by the heat, while others coughed and gasped, unaccustomed to the harsh environment. "Here," Alex said, offering his water flask to a young alien with delicate, feather-like appendages who looked close to fainting. The alien hesitated, eyes wide with surprise, before gratefully accepting the flask. It was a small gesture, but Alex could see the effect it had on the others. Their gazes softened, and for the first time he sensed a shift in their attitude. They weren't just following him out of necessity, they were beginning to trust him. They finally reached the rocky outcrop, and Alex climbed up first, helping the others up one by one. From this vantage point, he could see the path ahead, and his heart sank. The simulation chamber was filled with more rivers of lava, jagged cliffs, and choking fog. This malfunction was far more severe than he'd anticipated, and there was no clear way out. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We're going to make it," he said firmly, meeting each of their eyes. "But we have to work together. I know you're all stronger than me in different ways, so let's use that to our advantage." Zira's tail curled with anxiety, but she nodded. "What do you need us to do?" Alex quickly assessed each student's strengths, assigning roles to make the most of their abilities. Ulok, with his strength, was tasked with clearing larger obstacles, while Zira, nimble and fast, would scout ahead for safer paths. Riki, who could detect subtle changes in the atmosphere, was responsible for warning them of any approaching dangers. As they began to move again, Alex noticed the way his classmates looked at him, no longer with disdain, but with a newfound respect. Their fear and hostility had melted away, replaced by a willingness to trust in his judgment. For the first time, Alex felt like he belonged here, like he was truly part of the team. Despite the grueling environment, they pressed on, each student contributing their skills and strengths to the group's survival. Alex's leadership guided them through each obstacle, and with each success their confidence grew. By the time they reached the final stretch, he could feel a sense of camaraderie building among them, a bond forged not through rivalry, but through shared struggle and trust. As they neared the exit, a deafening alarm sounded, and the chamber's lights flickered back to normal. The simulated environment began to fade, revealing the familiar metallic walls of the chamber. The door hissed open, and Professor Roshal's voice crackled over the speakers, relief evident in his tone. "Students, the malfunction has been resolved. You may exit the chamber. Well done." The group staggered out, exhausted but triumphant. They turned to Alex, expressions of gratitude and admiration on their faces. Ulok stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by humility. "Alex... thank you. I didn't think a human could do ... what you did." Alex managed a tired smile, feeling the weight of their respect settle on him. "We all made it through together. That's what matters." In that moment, Alex knew that he had finally earned his place at Galactic High, not just as a human, but as a respected peer. And his classmates knew that they had misjudged him, that there was more to humans than they'd ever realized. As Alex and his alien classmates staggered into the open space of the simulated desert, their muscles ached, and the scorching air scraped against their lungs with every breath. The malfunction in the simulation was severe, transforming what was meant to be a controlled survival exercise into a life-threatening scenario. The usual guidance and monitoring systems that would direct them out of danger were down, leaving them entirely on their own. The oppressive heat, the rivers of simulated lava, and the billowing clouds of toxic fog made the environment feel dangerously real. When the simulation began, Alex had stayed silent, observing his classmates, but now he was thrust into a position he never expected. For the first time, they looked to him not with ridicule, but with dependence and something close to respect. Alex took a deep breath, scanning the arid landscape around them. He could see a path leading up a steep slope, where they might escape the worst of the heat and find cleaner air. "Follow me," he instructed, his voice carrying a confidence he hadn't felt before. His alien classmates, typically so eager to tease or dismiss him, followed without a word. As they navigated their way through the blistering terrain, Alex kept everyone moving, focusing on small, achievable goals to keep the group motivated. His classmates had started to reveal their vulnerabilities, struggling in ways he hadn't expected. Zira, the small alien with silvery fur, stumbled, unable to keep up with the pace due to her delicate physiology. Riki, the blue-skinned alien whose thin frame was ideal for floating, had difficulty maintaining balance in the thick fog. They'd once laughed at Alex's perceived fragility. But now, in the face of genuine adversity, it was Alex who was holding them together. "Stay low," Alex advised. "The air is clearer close to the ground. Keep breathing shallow and try not to panic. We'll get out of here, but we need to stay calm." Ulok, who had been the most vocal of Alex's tormentors, looked visibly shaken, his scaled face pale. He glanced at Alex, an emotion flickering in his eyes that seemed almost like guilt. For all his physical strength, Ulok was clearly rattled, unprepared to cope with the mental strain of a crisis. In his own world, he'd never been tested like this. "You really know how to handle this, don't you?" Ulok muttered, his voice barely audible. Alex glanced at him, catching the rare vulnerability in Ulok's expression. "I've learned to deal with things one step at a time. Panicking just makes it harder to think. We'll get out of here if we keep moving together." They pushed on, reaching a steep rocky incline that Alex believed would lead them to safety. The path was narrow and challenging, with loose rocks that shifted underfoot, threatening to send them tumbling back down. Alex went first, carefully testing each step before signaling to the others to follow. "Hold on tight to the rocks," he called over his shoulder. "It's going to be slippery, but we can manage it." One by one, his classmates ascended the incline, their confidence in Alex growing with each safe step. Zira, using her flexible tail to balance herself, climbed with relative ease. Ulok, meanwhile, struggled, unused to navigating such delicate terrain, but Alex turned back, offering him a hand and guiding him up. Once they reached the top, they found a small ledge with a limited view of the terrain below. From this vantage point, Alex could see an emergency exit, but it was blocked by simulated debris that had fallen during the malfunction. The sight of their potential escape filled the group with renewed hope, but the path there was still treacherous. "What now?" asked Riki, glancing anxiously at Alex. "We need to clear that exit if we want to get out of here," Alex said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "But we'll have to work together to do it. Ulok, you're the strongest. Can you help me move some of that debris?" Ulok hesitated, glancing at Alex, a mix of shame and gratitude on his face. It was clear that Ulok's earlier arrogance had been stripped away by the harsh reality of the situation. For the first time, he looked at Alex with genuine respect. "Yeah, I can do that," he replied, his voice steadying. Together they worked to clear the debris, and as they did, the others joined in, each contributing in their own way. Zira used her tail to pull away smaller rocks, while Riki used her heightened senses to warn them whenever the ground shifted or when any toxic fumes drifted their way. With each piece of rubble they removed, they inched closer to freedom, but the process was grueling. Sweat poured down Alex's face, his muscles aching, but he refused to give up. Finally, with a combined effort, they cleared the last of the rubble, revealing the exit door. Alex stepped back, breathing heavily, but filled with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt since arriving at Galactic High. His classmates stared at the open door in disbelief, and then, as if on instinct, they looked at Alex, their expressions softened with respect and something else, gratitude. "Go on," Alex said, waving them through. "I'll follow behind to make sure everyone gets out." One by one, his classmates exited the simulation chamber, nodding at Alex as they passed. Some murmured words of thanks, while others simply looked at him with expressions that needed no words. When it was finally just Alex and Ulok left in the chamber, Ulok paused, glancing at Alex with a hesitant look. I was wrong about you," Ulok said quietly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the chamber. "I thought humans were weak. I thought you'd hold us back. But you saved us. I don't think any of us would have made it without you." Alex studied Ulok's face, recognizing the sincerity in his words. There was no trace of mockery, no hidden insult, just a genuine admission of respect. "Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, Ulok," Alex replied. "I may not be as strong as you, but that doesn't make me weak. And it doesn't make you weak for needing help. We all have something to offer." Ulok nodded, his face softening. "I guess I have a lot to learn." As they stepped through the exit together, the simulation chamber powered down, and the sounds of the artificial environment faded, replaced by the sterile, quiet atmosphere of the school corridors. Standing outside the chamber was Professor Rashal, her multifaceted eyes gleaming as she watched the group with a proud expression. "Well done, students," she said, her voice filled with approval. "I witnessed the last moments of your struggle, and I must say, I am deeply impressed by how you work together." Alex felt his cheeks flush, unused to such direct praise, especially from a teacher he respected so much. He opened his mouth to respond, but Rashal raised a hand to stop him. "There is no need for modesty, Alex. You demonstrated exactly why diversity and unity are essential in our galaxy. Each of you has something valuable to offer, but it is only when you work together that you reach your full potential. Let today's experience be a lesson to all of you." The other students nodded, their faces solemn as they absorbed Rashal's words. Alex felt a surge of pride and relief, knowing that he had proven himself not only to his classmates but to himself. As the group dispersed, Alex found himself walking down the corridor with his classmates at his side, but this time it felt different. Ulok walked next to him, offering a rare, tentative smile. Zira and Riki joined in. chatting animatedly about the ordeal they had just endured, treating Alex as an equal, as a friend. For the first time since he'd arrived at Galactic High, Alex felt like he belonged. The hostility and loneliness he'd endured had been replaced with genuine friendship and respect. His classmates saw him not as a primitive human, but as someone who had proven his strength in a way they had never anticipated. As they reached the main hall, where students from other simulations were gathered, Ulok stopped and turned to Alex, his voice loud enough for those around them to hear. "Hey everyone, if it weren't for Alex, we wouldn't have made it out of that simulation. He led us, saved us. Don't underestimate humans, they're a lot tougher than they look." A few other students glanced over, their eyes widening in surprise at Ulok's words. They looked at Alex with newfound interest and respect, murmuring among themselves. Alex felt his cheeks redden again, but he stood tall, his confidence no longer shaken by what others thought of him. In that moment, he realized he had not only earned the respect of his classmates but had also changed their perception of humans in general. He had proven that strength wasn't only about physical power but about resilience, courage, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. As the day ended and Alex walked back to his quarters, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been challenging, but he knew now that he belonged here. And from this day forward, Galactic High School would no longer feel like an alien world, but a place where he was respected, valued, and truly at home.